morning. And thank you all for joining the first board meeting of 2024. We have not held a full board meeting at U-Bolt in years, and it's a delight to be here on campus. As we all know, today is our first meeting since the passing of our colleague, Regent Doug Peters. Doug represented the best of Maryland, dedicated to his family, to his church, and to his community. We will miss his leadership, his insight, and his wonderful sense of humor. Our thoughts continue to be with his family, friends, and loved ones. As we move into a new year, let me take a moment to acknowledge the USM leaders included in the Daily Record 2324 Power 100 list. Chancellor Furman was once again ranked in the top 15 this year, up to the number 5 spot, so moving up the list. Also in the top 100 were UMBC President Valerie Shears Ashby, Towson University President Mark Ginsburg, UMB President Bruce Jarrell, UMCP President Harold Kynes. Congratulations to all of you. Before moving our agenda, I want to note that we come together during Black History Month. Our universities are often rich in varied programming commemorating Black history perspectives and experiences. If you had seen the university's web pages, you will see panel discussions, readathons, film screenings, art exhibitions, community service projects, and other social events relevant to Black culture and American history. Fortunately for all of us, today's meeting's in the middle of the month, so we have 2 more weeks to get to the campuses and to take part in the educational event. Touring our agenda, we will first hear from our host this morning, University of Baltimore President Kurt Smoke. Following President Smoke, we will hear from UMB Police Chief Leon, and then the educational forum will follow. And then we'll move to our reports from Chancellor Furman and the advisory groups. And because the room's a little tight here, if you have a microphone and you want to speak from where you sit, it's perfectly okay rather than trying to navigate the room. And so, but we'll let you make the call on that. And so, with that, Kurt, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the Board of Regents, Chancellor. It's a real pleasure to have you here. And rather than making a traditional presentation, because you've heard from me before, you know, athletically we're still undefeated. I thought that I would ask our new provost, because of his perspective, to give you an update on where we are academically. Ralph Mueller, our new provost, came to the United States from Germany on the Rotary Scholars and was able to get a BA, MA, and PhD degrees in mathematics and applied statistics from Elon University, Wake Forest, and Virginia Tech. And he's been in a number of administrative roles, a number of different universities, public and private. So I've asked him to give you a brief overview of where we're headed on the academic side. Dr. Mueller?
Welcome, Dr. Mueller.
Thank you so much. Kurt, thank you so much for the introduction. And Chancellor Furman, Chair Gooden, members of the Board of Regents, university presidents, and other guests. It was great to meet and chat with several of you during last night's reception. I'm looking forward to getting to know you better and collaborating with you on the important issues that face USM and other institutions and systems of higher education. It is a pleasure to welcome you to our campus, to introduce you to this special university, and to briefly outline the academic directions toward its promising future. Having learned about the University of Baltimore from my new colleagues for the past 8 months now, I'm convinced that UBalt's specialized mission serves a critical role in advancing the prosperity of the city, the state, and the university system of Maryland. The University of Baltimore is a university for Baltimore. It is the city's anchor institution, and it serves as Maryland's metropolitan center for professional and graduate education. Almost 100 years ago, a group of local business professionals founded UBalt as a different type of college, a night school for working adults. And today we remain different, and that is by design. By now, UBalt's 4 colleges and schools, the College of Public Affairs, the Merrick School of Business, the Law School, one of only 2 law schools in the state, and the Yale Gordon College of Arts and Sciences, offer 60-plus degree-focused curricula leading to baccalaureate and master's degrees, as well as the Juris Doctor, the Doctor of Public Affairs, and the Doctor of Science. UBalt is a university that opens social opportunities to those who know where they want to go and who are determined to better their lives through experiential higher education. Last evening, you heard about one powerful example, our Second Chance program at Jessup Correctional Institution. Often our students are from traditionally underserved populations and are the first in their families to experience college. More than 40% of our students identify as African American, thus UBalt is federally designated as a PBI, a predominantly black institution. UBalt's desired enrollment split is 40% undergraduate and 60% graduate. We primarily recruit and attract upper division undergraduate and graduate students who seek career-readying, applied degrees and research opportunities. More than 90% of our 3,000 plus students reside in Baltimore City and its surrounding counties. A 2005 decision to expand our upper division mandate to henceforth also admit freshmen has proven to be challenging, both from recruitment and institutional identity perspectives. As a commuter campus with none of the amenities associated with traditional college experience, such as dorms, athletic teams, or even cafeterias, we are handicapped to compete for students and challenged to articulate our historic and unique character. Thus, at a doorstep away from our 100th anniversary, we feel the time is opportune to refocus and reintroduce the University of Baltimore as an institution for working adults, for transfer and graduate students, and also for a small number of lower division students, all of whom are decisive and deliberate in their pursuit of professional degrees. Throughout the past few months, we have begun to zero in on 4 overarching academic priorities: student success, community engagement, partnership development, and cross-disciplinary learning, teaching, and research. First, early last fall, we constituted the Student Success Council, a new university-wide committee to make changes to policies and practices that will remove structural barriers to our students' success. Second, based on UBalt's historic commitment to continual service to the City of Baltimore, an existing university task force was charged to start the formal process of applying for the prestigious community engagement classification from the Carnegie Foundation. Third, we aim to contribute to the governor's and to the chancellor's educational priorities. Among our immediate goals is to deepen partnerships with area community colleges by closely aligning curricula for a seamless process of dual admission and transfer into UBalt. Similarly, we are working to establish anchor partnerships with city high schools to significantly expand dual enrollment opportunities for cohorts of students who commit to completing focused curricula designed to shorten the time to a college degree. And fourth, as the University of Baltimore assesses and reasserts its value proposition, an opportunity arises to foster innovation at the teaching and learning levels. Specifically, we will be emphasizing more cross-disciplinary learning by advancing problem-based rather than discipline-based teaching and research. For example, by rolling out pre-law curricula that are closely coordinated across all of our schools and colleges, UBalt is poised to become the region's destination for pre-law preparation. Similarly, cybersecurity-related programs in our public affairs, business, and arts and sciences colleges will be starting to share more faculty expertise, elective courses, and marketing efforts. On the applied research front, UBalt's average annual externally funded expenditures exceed now $19 million. Under the recently released new Carnegie classifications for 2025, this will qualify UBalt as a member of Carnegie's distinguished group of research colleges and universities. For example, the university attracts more than $14 million annually to support its Center for Public Safety Innovation, a nationally renowned hub to support community safety initiatives. Or this past December, faculty members from our 4 colleges and schools came together to submit a $7.5 million pre-proposal to the NSF to start a Center for Edge Intelligence, Visualization, and Cybersecurity. In sum, amidst the current challenges facing higher education, the University of Baltimore is well positioned to expand its role in and for Baltimore by empowering the city's adult learners to achieve their educational and career goals. While significant enrollment challenges remain, this year UBalt's retention rates are up across the board, to the highest rates in several years. For first-time students, up 4% to 60% retention. For new transfer students, up 3% to 70% retention. And for new graduate students, up 6% to 73% retention. I'm really proud to have become part of the University of Baltimore and the University System of Maryland. On behalf of our faculty, staff, and students, I extend a wholehearted welcome and wish you a most productive meeting ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost.
Madam Chair, we celebrate our 100th anniversary in 2025, so please come back and party with us.
All right, that's fair. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank you, President, for a wonderful dinner last night and in a perfectly beautiful venue. And with 2 inspiring speakers on your Second Chance program. It is really great to hear about all the things that are happening here. Now, next we'll turn to Chief Leone to deliver this meeting's security vignette. Chief Leone, as you know, is UMB's Assistant Vice President for Public Safety and the Police Chief. He's going to speak with us about UMB and UBalt's unique collaboration on public safety. Welcome, Chief.
Good morning, and thank you.
Good morning.
You invited me back, so that's a privilege in itself, right, from our last meeting. President Schmoke, thank you. I've also enrolled in the Doctors of Public Administration program here at UBalt, so we want to keep the tradition going. So good morning. I want to talk about our collaboration between the University of Baltimore and the University of Baltimore, Maryland. In March of 22, we began collaborating and forming a partnership to share police services here on the University of Baltimore campus with UMB. And what does this mean? UMB provides police and dispatch services here to the University of Baltimore. In doing this, we wanted to make sure we took the approach necessary that UBalt and its community could see familiar faces here policing the campus as we move forward. So when we initially entered into the agreement, we brought in the University of Baltimore police officers to UMB. And we'll talk about the unique challenges that we had with that as we go through this. But we wanted the consistency and the familiar face here on the UBalt campus. And UBalt continues to provide security ambassadors as greeters and front door ambassadors as you come onto campus. They also are the eyes and ears for the police department. You know, why was this partnership established? The close proximity made all the sense in the world. We're about 1.5 miles separate the 2 campuses. The commitment of the universities and the university leadership to public safety here on our campuses. And the universities are similar. We're non-residential. mainly graduate students. The benefits of the partnership: we improved effectiveness and efficiency across all sectors. There were some redundancies. Command staff, we were able to merge the command staff. We were able to combine some things that both organizations maintained. CALIA accreditation, the radio services, our records keeping process, all of those were redundant processes that we had on both campuses, and we found that it was efficient to join those services. Operational efficiency along the way as well. We realized that here on UBalt campus that we could maintain a visual presence and provide a high level of service, but we also were able to add to our staffing. So when we brought the officers over from UBalt, we were able to add to the manpower that we've currently had at UMB, which was a win for both of us. We added more staff that we could put more resources to situations. A thing that really improved along the way was our communications. We want to be proactive in all of our communications. We want to get out in front of situations. At UMB, we have a professional public information officer assigned to the police department. So that helps with our communications on both campuses across the board. It's consistent messaging, outreach, and education. And it's two-way communication. President Schmoke and Vice President Bobart meet with me regularly. We talk through things that are going on the UBalt campus. Some of the unique challenges we face, like this was the first time this was done in the USM. It was the first time that it was done in recent history across the state, combining two police departments. So there were some legislative challenges that we had to work through. There were some challenges with the Maryland Police Training Commission as well. And we had to work with our human resources partners at UMB and at UBalt to make the transition as smooth as it possibly could be. I will say that everyone that engaged in this process had a get things done approach, and they wanted to bring this to a positive outcome. So look, I could go on and on about the partnership. The partnership has been a success, and I would say it's a success from the point of view that President Schmoke and President Gerald have a common vision of public safety here on campus. They believe for our students, staff, and faculty to reach their full potential, they have to feel safe in the space that they are working in. And for the UMB side of things, this was a win as well. We added additional staffing. We have more resources to provide to both campuses as we go through this. We were able to hit the ground running on the UBalt campus. Really, it's because of our policing philosophy. It's data-informed policing with a community-oriented foundation. And we believe in building the trust and legitimacy with our community members. We constantly are working at improving our communication. We meet regularly. I meet regularly with Vice President Bobart to talk about the specific needs and the unique challenges that UBalt faces. I'm going through my list. Our philosophy at UBalt is the same thing that we are doing at UMB. And a positive for the UBalt community was that we're able to add some of the resources that we use at UMB, the community outreach and assistance team, the Comfort K-9. We were working and partnering with the Baltimore Police to do wheel lock giveaways, which we recently had here at a steering wheel lock giveaway here at UBalt. And those little things make a difference in the community. We were approachable, we want to be part of the community, and we want a positive outcome. And I will open it up to questions.
Any questions for Chief Leon? I don't see any, but I would like to thank you for all that you do. This is a great example of effectiveness and efficiency. We talk a lot about it, but you guys have actually done it. And so thank you, and good luck on that dissertation. So we'll move now to the educational forum. Our topic today is the transfer landscape in Maryland. Dr. Candace Caraco, Associate Vice Chancellor for Academic Programs, Academic and Enrollment Services, and Articulation, that's quite a title, will be speaking with us about the transfer landscape in Maryland, including national trends, where Maryland is, and what tools are available. Dr. Caraco, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair Gooden. Chair Ganella, Regents, good morning. Presidents, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you about transfer today. I think I've got the mic in the right place now. So what I'll do today is speak a little bit about some national data on transfer and talk about where Maryland and the USM are in relation to that data. I'll point to some places where you can find more information on transfer for the system, and finally describe some of the efforts underway to strengthen our transfer pipelines. Strengthening our transfer pipelines is a goal of our Vision 2030 strategic plan, and of course those pipelines are very important to growing the strength of our regional higher education centers. In national discussions about transfer and also in the national tracking of data, there are three nonprofits that are very prominent in this space: the Aspen Institute's College Excellence Program, the Community College Research Center at Columbia University, and the National Student Clearinghouse Research Center. The Clearinghouse gathers enrollment and degree data from high schools and colleges all over North America, so there's quite a trove of data there. There were two very influential reports that came out in 2016. They're about to be updated. One was Tracking Transfer, and then also the Transfer Playbook, which had some policy recommendations. These were partnerships of Aspen and CCRC. And they were very focused on a particular data point that came out earlier, that most students who are degree seeking entering a community college wish to earn a bachelor's degree. But in the end, only about a third of them attend a four-year, and fewer than half of them gain a baccalaureate degree. That's not necessarily what happens in Maryland or the USM, but nationally, that's the central leaky pipeline problem. So these metrics of transfer out rate from community colleges and baccalaureate completion are very important metrics, and they're used for tracking effectiveness across the country. The U.S. Department of Ed uses them, and they had a convening of states in November. Maryland sent a team, and they talked about things that were very important to improving the transfer pipeline. So the engagement of presidents was very critical, and I'm happy to tell the Regents all of our presidents have been very engaged in transfer initiatives. Very important to have clear public pathways for equitable access and success, and they also talked about the importance of regional dyads, pairs of community colleges and four-year institutions that had very clear, strong pathways. And I'll just say there, they noted Salisbury and Warwick have a very strong pipeline, and UMES has won an Aspen Institute grant, one of only 21 institutions across the country, that was a couple years ago, to work on the regional dyad. So we're fortunate out on the Eastern Shore. So when we look at the national data on Title IV recipients, so these are students who've gotten federal financial aid, the completion rate of students who started at a community college in 2012, Maryland comes out fourth in the country. We're also third in the country for transfer out from a community college, so we're doing pretty well. There's also some more recent data from NSCRC, and this shows for those students who graduated from a community college, the median completion rate by state. So here Maryland is fifth, still pretty good. And each of those dots represents a public four-year institution. So you'll see there's a wide spread. And this ties to mission. I mean, a higher access institution typically has a lower graduation rate. You know, we try to do better, but it is the case that in Maryland, as in other states, that less affluent students graduate at lower rates. So that's an area of opportunity for all of us. But we're doing quite well as a state, and the system, you'll see, does better than the state as a whole. And finally, this data also came from the U.S. Department of Ed. They actually have a new Office of the Chief Economist at the Department of Ed, and they've been releasing this data. So on the x-axis, we have that transfer out rate, which they talk about as an access rate. And on the y-axis, we have the baccalaureate completion rate. So Maryland is in the right part of the chart. High access, high completion. And I would just say one of the reasons why we probably have a high completion rate, for the last 25 years, we have had a guaranteed admission policy in the state. If you graduate from a Maryland community college with an associate degree and a 2.0, you are guaranteed a spot in a Maryland public institution. Now, there are some that have more selectivity, certain programs. It doesn't guarantee you a particular seat in a particular program, but it does guarantee you a seat in a 4-year. And not all states have that kind of regulation. So if we look at the USM, right now, 68% of all Maryland Community College transfers graduate within 6 years with a bachelor's degree. Chad Muntz, our Associate Vice Chancellor for Decision Support and Institutional Research, tells me that this was not always the case. About 10 years ago, he reported to the board we had about a 50% rate. But at that point, we noted that the more credits you earned at the community college, the more likely you were as a transfer student to complete a bachelor's degree. So we've incentivized that, and now our rates are up and among the best in the country. And they're also at least as good at our regional higher ed centers as they are at our home campuses. Compared to nationally, we're quite far ahead of the curve. Now, Maryland Community College transfer students are not necessarily all transfer students. Maryland Community College students constitute about a quarter of our total transfer population, and they're more likely to attend full-time, so they're a little bit more predictable. We have on the USM website the IRIS transfer dashboard. There's some other dashboards, again, thanks to Chad and his team, and also Marcus Harrington and the folks in IT. We have this nice interactive dashboard. So last year we brought in totally 35,704 transfer students. It's a very important part of our new enrollment every year. We care about in-state and also out-of-state transfers. So both Bowie and Coppin, for example, have agreements with community college systems out of state to leverage, among other things, the new tuition rate and to draw students to HBIs where they might not be able to attend one in their home state. And then there's also a dashboard. You can select on the dashboard just the Maryland Community College students. So we typically bring in between 9,000 and 10,000 transfer students. It's down a little bit, started down a little bit before the pandemic and then during the pandemic. That's consistent with community college enrollment, which is itself down in Maryland and across the country. We are seeing some recovery post-pandemic. We expect that to continue. Some recent data from NSCRC showed that students under 20 are increasing their enrollment at community college at a higher rate. We also see that African American students are returning to community college at a faster rate than other groups. So that reminds us that community college enrollment is another way that we ensure that our USM student population reflects the population of the state. So this is a graphic from the Maryland Higher Education Commission. I wanted to point it out to you because it's posted and they've shown it at a meeting. And it's a little bit hard to see, but the URL is there. On the left, there's a table of how many transfer students come from various community colleges and then which of our public institutions in the state they attend. But I want to emphasize that this is a fall snapshot. So more students come in May as well. And at UMGC in particular, there are almost as many students enrolling in January as they do in the fall. So if we were to annualize this data, we would see that UMGC is the largest recipient of Maryland Community College transfers. But College Park, our flagship, is also a very large recipient of community college transfer students. And it is not the case in many states that the flagship receives so many transfer students. So that is a plus for Maryland. So what are we doing to improve our transfer pipelines? So I just picked 3 student-centered initiatives because, again, we want our strategic plan to be student-centered. So dual enrollment, you know from Maryland's, the blueprint for Maryland's future at the K-12 level, there are more resources now for dual enrollment. Community colleges are very engaged in this, but so are our four-year institutions. And this is not a competition. We see nationally that as dual enrollment goes up in the community colleges, enrollment has not suffered at the four-year institutions. I will say that we don't know long-term much about dual enrollment and how many credits people are bringing in, but as of this year, the MHEC Maryland Data Advisory Group has added a variable, so in future years, we will be able to see how many credits from courses students earned in high school. So you've heard before about transfer with success, the 2021 statute, and you've heard about the regulations, so I won't go into a lot of detail, but I will say this is a complex implementation, and on the campuses, multiple data systems are involved. This is not an easy lift. We did not receive new resources to do this work. So the campuses are working very hard to align with the data that has been and will be requested by the state. The goal here was to make sure that students don't lose credits between community college and four-year institutions, and that they don't, quote, repeat content. So I will say that in June 2022, MHEC posted some information on its website, and they said for the whole state of Maryland, not just USM, that a student from a community college with junior status has attempted and completed about 4 more credits than a student who's not a transfer student. So we might infer that students are maybe losing 4 credits and moving from the community college to the four-year. We do need to dig into that data a little more. We don't want them losing any credit, but this is also not a huge amount of credit. It's about 1 course. So sometimes in the national publications you see students are losing most of their credits before they transfer. That is not the case in Maryland. It's certainly not the case in the USM. For many years, since the 1990s, USM had a transfer and articulation platform. This was homegrown. Students could see how their community college course equated to a four-year course at a number of public and private institutions, and they could also see what courses to take to prepare for entry into a particular four-year program. A few years ago, there was a decision made to move to a vendor and get a state-of-the-art transfer and articulation platform that will be mobile-friendly, have data integration for immediate updates. We did get some resources for this. It pretty much covers the cost of the vendor. This is also a very large, complex implementation. It's essentially 36 at least different data integrations, and if you've ever moved a platform, you know there's a lot involved in that. So we have 36 different institutions doing this. We will have some enhancement from the old platform. The Regents have some extra slides from the vendor on the portal if you want to see any specifics. And I want to thank my team for all the work they're doing to implement this platform. So one of the important things to make transfer pipeline strong is to collaborate well. And we have a number of routine venues for collaboration. There's an Arts Advisory Council. It includes some students sort of looking at how to improve the functionality of ArtsIS. And it's also multi-segmentary. We have bi-weekly meetings of our USM transfer coordinators, and a couple of times a semester we invite the community college transfer coordinators. In November, we had an Enrollment Management Professionals Day statewide to help people share promising practices. Probably have another transfer day in May or June, depending. We're working with MHEC to see about the timing. The public institutions, 2 and 4-year, have a representative group, Provost Transfer Council. They look at the challenges we have in transfer and how can we improve them. They've charged faculty groups to look at particular courses that have had trouble transferring. And basically, they also kind of make sure that leadership is involved in these efforts so that things are moved forward. And certainly, there's a lot of partnering going on at the regional higher education centers. So in summary, we're doing pretty well. We could do better, especially with our lower income students. And the USM is trying to be a good partner and collaborator. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
questions for Candace?
Yes.
I'd say, good morning.
Good morning.
On figure one, looking back at where Maryland ranked number 4 and I guess New Jersey was ranked number 1, were you able to see any comparisons amongst what that state has been able to do in order to succeed in terms of the community college student gap to your 4 years?
So I can draw some inferences, but I can't give you an absolute sure reason why it's happening. I think that New Jersey, like Maryland, is an affluent state. Their community colleges are part of one system. So some of our transfer students also move around. They don't just go to one community college in one 4-year. And so sometimes credits don't align between community college either. And also, if you have a central system, sometimes it's easier to get policies that are quite aligned. And New Jersey has a good record of providing need-based aid. And so, to paraphrase Chancellor Perman, the best way to help a student with financial need is to give them financial resources. So there could be a number of variables. When you look at graduation rates absent from access rates, the other thing you might look at is, like in California, for example, when they come up at the top, they have a lower transfer out rate, but they have a number of elite institutions in the top 50 in the U.S., and so their median rate kind of goes up with that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You?
I don't have a question, Madam Chair, but I have a comment. I think, with our strategic plan being student-centric focused, this is one area that just jumps out at you to be incredibly student-centric in terms of this, to make this process as simple as possible, make sure all the credits transfer to the extent that they can. All of that really just plays into that. So this is an area that certainly, any way we can enhance this would be smart to do.
Bill?
Good morning.
Good morning.
UMGC has a program where they provide credits for lifetime experience. Do we have a system-wide policy on that issue?
We do have a system policy on credit for prior learning, and the individual institutions also have policies on credit for prior learning, and they all have to be posted on the web, and how we take in things like AP credits, what score you need, that's all posted on individual institutions' websites. Depending on the mission, you may find variations in credit for prior learning with things like portfolios, but yes, that's a priority, especially for our institutions more focused on access.
One follow-up question, if I may. Is that program utilized very much by the students?
Well, parts of it, for example, at certain institutions, AP, IB credit utilized a lot. In terms of portfolios, it depends. We do have a lot of students at least a handful of institutions that bring in a lot of military equivalencies. And I don't know if Blakely wants to speak, Dr. Palmietto wants to speak to UMGC's credit for prior learning.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to address the question. We have a very broad set of opportunities for prior learning. The ones that Candace has been speaking about are forms of standardized testing that are available to articulate in for credit. The portfolio exam requires a learner to say, I think I might have all of the requisite knowledge, skills, abilities associated with human resources, with business administration 101. And they have to go through a process of demonstrating that, writing about the work that they have done, providing some documentation to support that. We have, I will say, less uptake of that by students because it is a relatively laborious process, but we do award credit and they go through an experiential process where they learn how to do this over and over again. We are right now working on revising that so that we can make it a less high stakes and more accessible option for more of our students. More recently, we are exploring how to increase access to challenge exams, where rather than write about a portfolio of experience, you might say, I want to test out of this class based on a unique exam we would provide to that learner based on our particular courses. And then finally, I think we're doing a lot with respect to how we use artificial intelligence to evaluate military education and training, not only through the military schoolhouses, but there are very formalized training programs as you move through each of the enlisted and subsequent ranks. And so we are trying to understand what's in scope of each of those structured curricula for the military service members, cross-reference that with the skills that we know are resident and taught in our particular courses. And then in addition to accepting transcripted credit that comes through the military academies, being able to also say, in addition, we know that based on rank, you've completed other training and experience, and we can go beyond the transcripted to award additional credit. So we're really doing a lot to make more accessible all forms of the prior learning portfolio, but the challenge exam and the portfolio itself are harder for students to do today.
Can I have one last follow-up? This is an interesting field for me. Does the availability of that program enhance enrollment?
We absolutely know that it attracts more learners at the point of inquiry and perhaps application. It's hard to tell a learner until they've provided some documentation how much credit they can actually get. So we do try to implement processes for unofficial evaluation. But yes, we see more learners who are attracted because we can give them more credit for prior learning.
Thank you.
Sarah?
Thank you for the presentation. So I had a question about the 9,000 coming from community colleges versus the 35 in general transferring annually. So that's a pretty big difference. Could you speak more about where the predominant number of transfer students are coming from, and in terms of proportion and like completion, if there's a difference between the community college students and people coming from other institutions?
Okay, I'm going to take this last question first because that's the easy one, I'm sure of. So the community college transfer students, more of them tend to be full-time, which helps with completion rates. The larger number of transfer students, you can actually see it probably better than I can. You can play around with the data. So some of them are transfers from foreign institutions, some of them are from out of state, some of them are from other USM or MICU, there's some back and forth. Many of them are from out of state. A good number of them are associated with UMGC. I mean, not all of them. There's a map there, and you'll see that, where do our students come from when they're from out of state? A lot of them from California, New York, Pennsylvania, Delaware. It's a much more diverse group of transfer students when they're coming from out of state. Each institution really needs to dig into their own data because they'll have different pathways and kind of different profiles of the students to try to figure out how to serve them best. More of them are part-time, as I mentioned, and so many of them are working. And I learned a new acronym actually recently from Eileen Abel, ALICE, Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed. So sometimes people who are employed are not eligible for Pell Grants, for example. But that doesn't mean they have a lot of disposable income for education. So this is a group that we need to figure out how to serve better.
Well, Candace, clearly, this was an interesting topic.
Sure.
Oh, another question?
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry, I do have another question. So I noticed also, in terms of like demographics of transfer students, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about, because I know there's a bill right now in Annapolis about like multilingual learners and transfer credits. So I see like on the chart there's like foreign, but I don't know if that's like international students. And then I'm not sure necessarily how many of these students are a part of that group. But I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the credits that are transferring versus the ones that aren't, and because it's like I think part of the reason the bill is introduced is like an equity framework.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I can't say how many of the transfer students are multilingual or have something other than English as a first language. I can speak to the bill in much more detail, which the USM supported. So right now before the General Assembly is a bill called the CALL Act, and so currently there are students at Maryland community colleges who take courses in English language acquisition. These are non-credit courses, but they're Pell eligible, which is an unusual thing. Typically, Pell is only for degree seeking, but these are high-level courses, and the faculty argued that these are comparable to a native English speaker, say, taking Spanish 101 or Russian 101, et cetera, and 102 and 103. And so the bill calls for these courses to be credit-bearing at the community college and then to be transferable as modern language courses. And so that's all, that's likely to pass, I think. And so the credits would then come through as, the way we handle other transfer credits. If a student completes an associate degree, I mean, first of all, in general, very little credit doesn't transfer in some form. Some of the community colleges would like certain courses to count more in a major, so there's some discussion about particular courses, but that's what the faculty groups are handling. Things like intermediate accounting might be a 200 level at the community college, a 300 level at the 4-year. How do we get them aligned? So those sorts of things are going on, but there shouldn't be a problem in the transfer of these credits for language acquisition.
Thank you. And do you know how many students are coming from like Baltimore City or?
So I don't know off the top of my head how many are coming from Baltimore City. You can do, in the transfer platform, you can select, I think, Baltimore City Community College and see how many are coming from there. There could be people in the city who go to CCBC, and that doesn't really, so our folks in IR would have to tell me if there's any more. If you can geocode. Chad says it's okay. I haven't made a mistake yet. So. Probably time for me to stop then.
Yeah, Fair, what you might want to do is go offline with Chad, and he'll be able to more in-depth answer your questions specifically on specific groups of students and where they're coming from.
Chad, stand up so everybody knows.
And over the years, Chad has put together an extremely comprehensive decision support system that supports the system and can provide almost any data in a very short period of time, and I've tested it on a number of cases.
Thank you.
Candace, thank you. It was very interesting. We'll now have the Chancellor's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you'll indulge me, I'm going to stay put. I begin by echoing your earlier words regarding Regent Doug Peters. Doug's life was defined by service. Service to his country, his community, to our state, to our students. His legacy animates our work going forward. And our dedication to that work, I think, is the most fitting way we can honor him. I know I speak for everybody at this table in saying that we miss him deeply. As we mark Black History Month, I want to congratulate our colleagues who made the Baltimore Sun's 25 Black Marylanders to watch. UMES President, Dr. Heidi Anderson, Dr. Essa Davis, Associate Vice President for Community Health at UMB, and Larry Stewart, men's basketball coach at Coppin State. In recounting our good news, I'll start with our host this morning, the University of Baltimore. We heard President Schmoke and Provost Mueller talk about their vision for U-Balt, but I want to give a nod to the work it's already doing every day. As we heard last night, U-Balt's Second Chance College program, educating and graduating incarcerated students. It's been such a light in Maryland and a light for our system, as has U-Balt's work on one of Governor Moore's top priorities, developing the next generation of public servants. And now with its new Urban Conflict Manager program, U-Balt will train the city's Safe Streets leaders in conflict management and violence prevention. This commitment, these connections, make U-Balt such a powerful force for good. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that President Schmoke himself has been a powerful force for good. Yes, pending approval by the MLB and league owners, Kurt will be part owner of our beloved Baltimore Orioles.
literally and figuratively a minority owner.
Now, I know behind the applause, you're all thinking that you're going to line up for some good seats. But you'll have to get behind me. Kurt, congratulations for all of this.
Thank you very much.
Now, let's look across the system. U.S. News and World Report has ranked the nation's best online degrees. 6 of our universities were recognized for 19 programs. Salisbury, Towson, UBalt, and UMBC were ranked for programs including business education and IT. And UMB's School of Nursing has 2 degrees ranked, including a #1 program among public universities in nursing administration. And College Park made the list in 10 business and engineering programs, with several top 10 rankings. The nation's top producers of Fulbright scholars and students were announced this week. UMB made the list for Fulbright scholars, UMBC and Towson for Fulbright students, and recognized for scholars and students is College Park, one of only a dozen U.S. colleges and universities to make both lists. Elsewhere across the system, Bowie State welcomed U.S. Education Secretary Miguel Cardona to campus. He learned about BSU's work to diversify the school counseling and mental health professions, efforts that ultimately make it easier for underserved people to get the care they need. And he learned how Bowie State is bringing more black men into teaching and supporting them to success. President Breaux, I was, as you know, thrilled to be able to join you and see Bowie State shine among our federal officials. UMB also hosted a member of President Biden's cabinet. Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra discussed the state of women's health care and reproductive rights with President Gerald, Governor Moore, and the UMB community. It was a timely discussion, given that Governor Moore announced this week that UMB will get $10.6 million to shore up abortion access in Maryland with its abortion care clinical training program. This grant joins some huge awards over the last several weeks. $30 million to prevent rehospitalization among IV drug users, $9 million to improve vaccine efficacy, $7 million to innovate trauma triage technology for mass casualty events. You know, in UMB's mission statement, it says improve the human condition. These are grants that demonstrate that commitment. So congratulations, President Sherrill. Coppin State. Coppin State is one of 3 universities partnering with Baltimore City Schools to fill a shortage of school nurses. It's a 5-year, $14 million program. It takes a 2-pronged approach, placing registered nurses in city schools and growing the pipeline of nursing students who choose to do school-based care. It's this kind of excellence that inspires Coppin's Be More capital campaign, $25 million campaign, the largest in Coppin State's history. So congratulations, Ms. Waterman, representing President Jenkins. I know you'll make your goal. Salisbury University has announced that its Museum of Eastern Shore Culture will open this summer next to SU downtown. This is a big deal for Salisbury's downtown. The museum will feature exhibits on local and indigenous cultures and include items from the wildfowl collection that was formerly displayed at the Ward Museum. And I'm sure Seagull Nation was proud to see SU Hall of Famer Dan Quinn, named head coach of the Washington Commanders. And Provost Couch, congratulations, and convey that to President LaPree, who I know is before the legislature this morning. UMBC is deep in the work of advancing diversity and inclusion in STEM, from its Meyerhoff Scholars Program to its Center for Women in Technology, and you can add another program to this effort. UMBC has joined a National Academies Collaborative to build new pathways in tech education and careers for underrepresented women. Also at UMBC, the Center for Research in Emergent Manufacturing is launching a $3 million project to work with the U.S. Army on digitizing its supply chain. For all of that, congratulations, President Shirzashki. Towson University is building on a historic 2023 when they welcomed their largest ever freshman class. This month, TU broke its record for incoming student applications, more than 20,000 of them. And since we're on a sport theme this morning, I will mention that TU alum Kristen Juszczyk made worldwide headlines when Taylor Swift wore one of her custom jackets to a Kansas City Chiefs game. Ms. Juszczyk has now landed a well-deserved licensing deal with the NFL. For all of this, congratulations, President Ginsburg. Now I'm done with sports. Let me talk about some of our students.
How about the weather?
I'm coming. At Frostburg State, grad students in the kinesiology program are working with local firefighters, examining how their on-the-job gear affects their stability, strength, and fitness. The goal is to improve firefighter performance, reduce injuries, protect public safety. It's a project with immediate and profound impact. Thank you, Vice President Delia. I might just digress here and comment. You see what I'm doing with these reports. Anybody that says that higher education is not relevant to our lives, to the human condition, they're mistaken. On the heels of celebrating a record year for young oysters in the Chesapeake Bay, UMSI's Imani Black was featured on local radio discussing the region's oyster population. She is pursuing her master's degree at UMSI's, but she's also founder and CEO of Minorities in Aquaculture, whose mission is to diversify the cultivation and study of marine life. I met Imani when I visited Horn Point a couple of years ago, and she is a shining example of UMSI's impact. Congratulations, President Dennison. UMGC, Madam Provost, had some wonderful coverage of its cybersecurity graduates. Jamel Shorts is a homegrown student who took college courses while still in high school, dual enrollment, then earned his associate degree at Prince George's Community College, then transferred seamlessly into UMGC, where he graduated in December with a bachelor's degree, a job with top security clearance, and no debt. So I would say for a university with global in its name, UMGC's impact is profoundly local. Thank you. For the third straight year, UMSI's pharmacy graduates, President Anderson, have achieved the highest first-time licensure pass rate of any HBCU pharmacy school. 3 straight years, a remarkable accomplishment. And in 2026, when we hope the first class of students is expected to enter UMES's School of Veterinary Medicine, They'll be the only veterinary students in Maryland. Thank you. The Washington Post captured the joy of College Park's future students. You may have seen this. Every year, a few lucky Maryland hopefuls among our applicants are greeted at their homes by Testudo and the University Marching Band, whose brass section literally trumpets their acceptance to the flagship. I hope some of you saw this. I did. It's a powerful reminder. You ought to see the reaction of those families. It's a powerful reminder that the college dream is alive, thriving in Maryland. And speaking of dreams, Dr. Jeanette Epps, a Clark School graduate in aerospace engineering, will soon live the dream of all aerospace engineers, I guess, President Pines, when she flies aboard a Dragon spacecraft to the International Space Station for a 6-month rotation with the crew. Now, President Pines is a fellow aerospace engineer. I know you're with her in spirit.
It's more personal than that. I was on her dissertation committee.
Oh! Well, Daryl sends his students to space. And now to our regional centers. Representative Steny Hoyer, Governor Moore, and his cabinet toured the USM at Southern Maryland this month, learning how the center partners with the Navy in autonomous technology R&D. And more than 1,000 tri-county students in Southern Maryland have descended on the USMSM in the last several weeks so that they can network with employers and explore local education and job opportunities. The USM at Hagerstown has hatched a novel way to incentivize this kind of student engagement. I like this approach. It's offering scholarships to students who visit USMH campus and subsequently enroll in a full-time program. The universities at Shady Grove launched the Joanne Bothman Innovation Fellows Program, honoring our beloved Senior Vice Chancellor Emerita. This annual fellowship supports 4 folks leading innovation in academia, industry, government, and nonprofits for a year, innovation that meets the need of local students and employers. A very fitting tribute to Jo, and I know she's very happy about it. In recent weeks, I have talked a great deal about the power and value of these regional centers. I've talked about it with lawmakers in Annapolis, how the centers serve students who could not get a college education, in other words, how they fill acute workforce needs in their local communities and drive the community's economic growth, how they engage younger learners and cultivate a college-going ethos. I told the legislators last week in testimony that I'm bullish on our regional centers. So I want to thank Dr. Abel, Dr. Kadimi, and Dr. Ashby for their leadership. And this brings me to my concluding remarks on the legislative session and the governor's proposed FY25 budget. The proposal includes $2.2 billion in state support for the USM. It is a $45 million cut, 2.2% over last year, though we do anticipate additional funding to cover COLA and merit increases for system employees. The budget does include nearly $36 million in new funding for our HBCUs. That's the 3rd installment of the 2021 settlement, and another $5 million for UMES to address chronic underfunding of land-grant HBCUs. We recognize that this budget could have been worse, given the deficit Maryland faces. At the same time, I hate to see us lose a single dollar, because every single dollar we get is vital to what we do for Maryland students. And that's where our focus is. So, and this was alluded to just a moment ago, if any funds come back to the system as the budget process goes through its legs, I've asked that they be directed to need-based financial aid. You know, we've come so far and dedicated so many dollars to our promise of access and affordability. We have to keep that momentum going. The legislative session has been incredibly busy by any standard. I understand that thus far over 3,000 bills have been filed. A number of them affect us. The testimony we've offered on these bills has been, in my judgment, powerful, and that's a credit to the engagement and collaboration of colleagues across the system. You and your folks advocate for us every single day in and out of Annapolis. And I see our advocacy pay off every time I watch elected officials come to our universities, use our universities as a backdrop to announce plans and programs that they consider important to Maryland and the nation. Every time our people are appointed to cabinet and policy posts, every time state and national leaders meet with our presidents, tour our schools, learn about our programs, and yes, fund them. It's a statement about how our leaders think about us. These leaders know we are essential to the strength and vibrancy of Maryland, and I thank all of you for affirming that every day. Madam Chair, this concludes my report.
Thank you, Chancellor. Any questions for the Chancellor? Yes, Tom.
Susan and I were talking last night about, it would be really helpful if we could identify those legislators who have been most helpful to us. I don't know how you do that process-wise, but just, we run into them. It's nice to say thank you to them. That information would be very helpful.
Glad to share it with you. You know what I worry about, the danger that we leave off somebody who needs to be thanked. Right, but exactly. we can
well,
be sensitive.
The other way to do that is just to maybe we have a call or something, we could talk about it without putting anything in writing.
Yeah, and we certainly can, beyond the session, make sure we do that at the conclusion of the session.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
And get information.
Some feedback mechanism without putting it.
Yeah, it's important to say thank you. I agree.
Any other questions or comments for the Chancellor? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the report of the councils, and we'll start with the university system staff. Dr. Patricia.
Hello, everyone. Chair Gooden, Chancellor Perman, Regents, and USM presidents. Good morning. I'd like to thank President Schmoke and the UBalt faculty and staff for a wonderful evening and for hosting us today. I personally continue to be impressed by the work that the University of Baltimore does in this community and in the state of Maryland, so thank you. You have my written report in the packet, but I'd like to highlight a few items of note for you today. We launched our 7th annual Shared Governance Survey intended to assess the health of shared governance in 2023 as observed and experienced by those involved in shared governance. We're also working with CUSIF to explore the potential of conducting a shared governance survey with the broader audience beyond those involved directly in shared governance. The goal of this survey is to understand the level of awareness of shared governance across our institutions, and we look forward to providing you with reports of those findings when we have them. The Board of Regents Staff Awards were due February 9th. In the coming months, we hope to put forward the best of the best for your review and approval. So this year, we received a total of 35 packets and received a packet from each of the 12 institutions this year. So I'm just thrilled by that. There were also 27 exempt packets and 8 non-exempt packets. We almost doubled our non-exempt packet submission for this year, and I just want to thank you because that is really, truly great. So thank you to all of our USM institutions for taking the time to recognize our fantastic staff. In January, Chancellor Perman and I met to discuss the benefits of Ombuds representation on our campuses and brainstorm strategies to advance this priority. We are seeing more and more cross-institutional collaboration and hope that the Ombuds Access might be another opportunity for that. I feel confident that we will continue to engage in discussion about how to use creative strategies to achieve this access to an important resource on our campuses. Next week is Advocacy Day, as Chancellor Perman just mentioned, where the USM councils go to Annapolis to speak with legislators about the USM and our respective councils and interests. 34 faculty, staff, and students from CUS, CUSIF, USMSC, and the USM Women's Forum have confirmed their attendance. This probably comes as no surprise, but one of the biggest areas we plan to speak to lawmakers about is the budget. Many staff are understandably concerned about the budget shortfall that the state of Maryland finds itself in and what role the USM and particularly its staff will be expected to play in compensating for that budget deficit. We're grateful for the thoughtful consideration that is being taken to how to address the situation. We know it's a fine line to walk between making up for the funding gap and reducing the impact on our campuses. However, I'd be remiss if I didn't advocate for continuing to keep the cost of living adjustment and possible merit in the USM budget for FY25. While also asking that campuses be cognizant of the additional burden on faculty and staff that can result from cutting positions while maintaining the same expectations of work output and meeting student needs. Overall, we look forward to the event next week where we can advocate for the USM and the interest of our collective shared governance boards. So thank you so much for your time today. I will take any questions you may have.
Any questions for Dr. Patricia? Seeing none, we will move on to the University System President, Dr. Bro.
Good morning, Madam Chair. I want to make sure my microphone is on. I'm going to speak from this location rather than trying to navigate to the podium. Good morning, Madam Chair, Chancellor Perman, Board of Regents, everyone gathered this morning. I want to first thank President Smoke and the entire campus community at UBalt for hosting today's program. We thank you for the hospitality. I'd also like to add my congratulations to all those listed on the Maryland Daily Record, our 100 list. Congratulations for all of your efforts, and to those who have worked with you and your various teams, especially for my colleague presidents. We know that no one does anything on their own, and so we thank our teams back on the campuses. I'd also like to add my sentiments to those expressed earlier by the chair and also Chancellor Perman with regard to Senator Doug J.J. Peters. He was a dear friend to Bowie State University. He was our senator prior to coming onto the Board of Regents. He will be deeply missed. He made it known that he was a stalwart supporter of higher education and of access and ensuring access to higher education. He and former Senator Miller led the way to ensure our HBCUs were strengthened in their ROTC programs and providing additional access for that pipeline and strengthening that pipeline. So again, he will be deeply, deeply missed. The formal report is in your booklet. I'd like to then let you know that CUS met twice, January 8th, February 5th, since the last board meeting. Our topics for the January 8th meeting included updates on shared services, enrollment and tuition, and ASME negotiations. The presidents and the senior staff also held discussions about student fees for employees, principals, and priorities for the legislative session, which started on January 10th. The February 5th meeting started with an update on legislative session, including bills that will or may have an effect on the University System of Maryland. And then the council discussed shared governance, as well as the recommendations of the program approval process work group. And we want to acknowledge our representative who's serving in that capacity, Darrell Pines. Thank you for your leadership. Also, Senior Vice Chancellor Herb spoke about ASME wage agreement and its impact. She was then joined by Vice Chancellor Lawrence and Budget Director Colleen Allberger to discuss the operating and capital budgets. Madam Chair, this concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Dr. Bro? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Maryland Student Council report by Ms. Gambier.
Good morning, Chair Gooden, Chancellor Perman, the Board of Regents, and University Presidents. And thank you so much, President Schmoke, for hosting us. I was grateful to be a part of the most recent and my first in-person Chancellor's Chat in January for international students. And thank you so much, Chancellor Perman, for having us. Many of the students were international graduate students, and I gained some extremely valuable feedback from them, especially on international graduate student housing needs, which was very applicable to the International Graduate Student Housing Resolution that the Student Council has been working on for a bit. I stayed in touch with them beyond the conversation and met with a few of them earlier this month again. And conversations like this have also sparked the possibility of introducing a subcommittee in the Council for International Student Needs. We had our first General Council meeting of the semester on February 4th. There were multiple items on this agenda, including collecting feedback on that housing resolution and on the proposed USM-wide civics course requirement. We'll also be bringing the shared governance survey back to the USMSC after a few years, after a break of a few years, and we'll report feedback from that as it comes. Additionally, we discussed a white paper which was written by a group of students, many of them from UMGC, advocating for system-wide hybrid learning options, especially for the disabled community. And towards the end of the meeting, the Council took some time to vote on 13 bills in session in preparation for the Government Relations Committee to testify. For the USM Student Speaker Forum, we have received speech drafts from each of the 5 presenters. We're very excited, and we'll be working closely with them on edits and revisions before the event in March. And finally, the Board of Regents Student Excellence Scholarship deadline has also passed, and the application deadline was on February 9th. We received 300 applications, which is pretty consistent with what we saw last year as well. And we are currently in the process of evaluating those applications to send out for your approval around April. And that concludes my report. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Gambare? Heidi?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Van Veer, thank you very much for a very nice report. Referring specifically to the Student Excellence Awards that you look at, the 300 applications, that's wonderful. And would just make a suggestion. Is it possible that you could let the presidents know which students applied from our institutions? Because many of them apply out there self-nominating. And mainly so that if they're not selected, we can go ahead and recognize them on our campus in some kind of way.
That sounds great. So we are still trying to put the packets together, but once that's done, we'll tally up the students from each campus and let you know.
Yeah, and we recognize that it was the first time with the awarded last year, so you're still working through a process. But last year, we know that all of them could not be awarded, and we failed to go back and recognize them. So this would help us make sure that when they go through this process and they're not selected, they get a little bit, discouraged, so we can actually do something on the campus for them.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
And we'll celebrate the winners, hopefully with all of you presidents who have winners at Hidden Waters again late in May. We'll get the dates.
Thank you, Chancellor. It's a lovely event, too.
How many do we award?
So there are 4 categories, and in each category we award 1 to a freshman or sophomore undergraduate, 1 to a junior or senior, and then 1 to a graduate student. So that makes it 12 in total.
From 300.
Yes. It is. That's why we want to recognize them.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now have the University System Faculty Report by Dr. Nurchak.
Thank you very much. My name is Nagaraj Nirchal, and I'm a professor of statistics from UMBC, and standing in for my distinguished chair, Professor Heather Haverback from Towson University. So this is our report since the last report, which I think happened in December 2023. So the first report of 2024. So during the last month or so, we have had 2 executive committee meetings and 1 general body meeting. So the general body meeting was held on January 23rd, last month, and it was held in person. And as you know that we are trying to move our way back to in person. So we had an extensive discussion. I'm sure this was in the report, one of our previous report, and finally decided to have at least one in-person meeting per semester format. Because one of the things that many people in CUSF general body felt is that in-person is a very critical thing for CUSF, because this is a system-wide thing. Systems are generally, geographically very different. And for us to get to know each other, at least once in a while, we need to see each other. With the mask, perhaps, but definitely. January meeting, the highlights actually were 3 resolutions on the topics of collective bargaining faculty, collective bargaining students, and retiree drug benefits. So there was extensive discussion on these things, and eventually the resolutions did pass. The wordings have to be read carefully, I must add. Specifically, CUSF did not vote blanket for collective bargaining, as we may have been misquoted recently. So CUSF did vote for the faculties to decide what they want to do in individual campuses. That is not the same as saying CUSF is for collective bargaining. So I think it should be read carefully. Looking forward, whatever is happening in the executive committee now will be in your report probably 1 or 2 or 3 months from now, I guess. Our education policy committee is putting together a system-wide conference on incorporating generative AI into learning experiences, a virtual showcase. So this will happen on Zoom on April 26, 2024 from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And event is being organized jointly by Kerwin Center, CUSF, Maryland Online, and Montgomery College. Right? So volunteers so this is call for presentations has gone out, and a lot of presentations have people have volunteered to do that, and so we are really looking forward to it. Faculty Affairs Committee is continuing to work on broad topics on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and academic support personnel. More specifically, each group is performing an assessment of policies and practices currently in place on campuses across the system. Each subcommittee will eventually report to CUSF, and we'll see what's going on. This is one of the, we think is responsibility of CUSF is to, share best practices from one campus to the another and so on. So Legislative Affairs Committee was leading the charge on the collective bargaining resolutions, and I think, as I mentioned, all 3 did pass, and specific wordings are available to you in the report. Finally, Rules and Membership Committee, I co-chaired that with my colleague from Towson, Dr. J. Zimmerman. Many of you probably know him. So one of the things that we found is that the CUSF Constitution still is listing the old names of the institutions, and in fact, in listing institutions that existed at the time of system formation but not there anymore, or need to be changed. So we right now we are going through an editing process. So that's my brief report.
All right. Are there any questions for Dr. Nair? Yes, Dr. Anderson.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. Just for clarification, please, is that the only change that you're looking at in your rules? Just changing the names of the institution, or are you looking at other substantive changes?
I think the substantive changes might come later on, but I think as a first step, we said that we should have a clean copy that everybody can read. So we are taking care of some edits.
Understood. And then the follow-up to that then is, how are you involving the other campuses in that rules review process?
Actually, this is a very, very good question. So our Constitution does have one article that requires, that has a statement that says that the changes to the Constitution need to go to, for ratification, that's not the word they're using, but ratification in individual campus senates or campus faculty bodies. But unfortunately, it's not clear whether it should be applied to every change or it was meant for the original Constitution. That's not clear. So this is one of the things that we are actually, just last executive committee, we debated it and said that this needs careful look at. So I think that one of the things that Alison has, Alison and I think our the administrator counterpart who attends all our exec committees said that she's going to run it by the lawyer's office, if I remember correctly. Right, Alison, you want to say something? No, that's right. All right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Neer.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll now have the public comment. Ms. Wilkerson will moderate the public session. Ms. Wilkerson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Each regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Regents will include a period for public comment. In accordance with the guidelines for public comment posted on the USM website, the agenda includes time set aside for this purpose. Requests for public comment should pertain to an item on the agenda. Today, 3 speakers have requested to address the board, and each will have 3 minutes to do so. They have asked to speak on civic engagement and civic education, which is on the consent agenda. The board fully dedicates this period of public comment to the speakers and will not respond to questions or comments during the meeting. As needed, any follow-up will take place after the meeting. So let me ask the first of our speakers to come forward. We have Ms. Asiya Silmi.
Good morning. My name is Asiya Silmi. I'm a Palestinian student at UMBC. And today I will be addressing the pressing topics of civil and global engagement. I aim to shed light on the responsibility of our academic institution bears in the ongoing genocide faced by the Palestinian people. For the past 75 years, Palestinians have endured harsh oppression at the hands of the Israeli settler colonial state. For 17 years, over 2 million Palestinians have been under siege in Gaza, creating conditions that the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, compared to hell on earth. Human rights atrocities are unequivocal. The United Nations, International Criminal Court, International Court of Justice, the United States Federal Court, and multiple human rights organizations, including Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the Jewish Voices for Peace, have all recognized the crimes against humanity being committed against the Palestinian people. It is critical for the University System of Maryland to reassess its connections, especially those contributing to the killing, occupation, apartheid, and systematic discrimination against Palestinians. Universities across Maryland continue to ignore the voices of the students when we demand you cut ties with academic and economic entities that fund and support the crimes committed by the Israeli government. The relations our academic institutions have with the very war profiteers that supply the weapons that have been killing almost 30,000 Palestinians, including Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman, is immoral and requires re-examination. This is one instance of many, from research partnerships, study abroad programs, and financial support that compromise the vision of our universities to advance knowledge economic prosperity, and social justice by welcoming and inspiring minds from all backgrounds, and our dedication to cultural and ethnic diversity, social responsibility, and lifelong learning. I especially urge a careful review of the endowment and investments of our universities from companies that directly or indirectly fund the genocide of Palestinians. It is my hope that you can recognize our collective responsibility in these global matters. It is our moral obligation to stand for justice and humanity. Maryland universities must disentangle themselves from entities complicit in human rights violations to stand on the right side of history, upholding our university's commitment to justice, equity, and global engagement. During Black History, just one more thing.
Before I ask our next speakers to come up, I want to ask that you stay on topic. The topic is related to civic engagement on our campuses and civic education. So if your topics can be focused on the topic that is on the agenda, we would appreciate it, because that you would be adhering to the guidelines for public comment. Ms. Torrey?
Thank you all, and good morning. I'm also here to address topics of civic engagement. I am not going to talk about numbers, but I do request that either now or right after this that you simply Google the Palestinian death toll in Gaza and the West Bank, just so you all know and empathize where we're coming from. As someone who was born and raised in Baltimore, a graduate of UMBC, and a 1L at the University of Maryland Carey School of Law, I am addressing you all as a product of the institutions that you run. America as a country has a rough history. As students and scholars of... Yeah, this is...
It's related. Let's go. It's related. Let us speak.
America as a country has a rough history. As students and scholars of academia, and as citizens of this country, we analyze our own history, and we rightfully so criticize it. That is what we have been taught by all of your institutions. And American history has made a lot more sense to me now, because what I have realized in the last 4 months is that the targeting, oppression, and destruction of entire racial and ethnic populations are easy to overlook when these individuals are seen as less than human. And you all know exactly what I mean. Native Americans as savages, Black Americans as servants or slaves, Japanese Americans as the enemy. The powerful people in your positions were either complicit or supported these racist and oppressive ideologies, allowing these mentalities to foster in our institutions until strong and admirable individuals came and challenged them. We all came here, all of these students, because you guys taught us about Martin Luther King Jr., Muhammad Ali, Justice Thurgood Marshall, where we praise these individuals because they stood up against injustice. I know you all feel uncomfortable because we're talking about a controversial topic. All of these individuals I mentioned were also controversial at some point. Injustice has always been controversial in this country until we fight against it and finally overcome it. Like Asya said, it's not easy, but we're asking you to reassess your connections that contribute to the killing, occupation, and apartheid of the Palestinians. Cut ties with economic and academic entities that fund the violations of international law by the Israeli government. I urge you all to stand on the right side of history instead of waiting for it to happen and then criticizing it afterwards. Thank you.
And our next speaker is Ms. Khadija Abdallah.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I didn't know that we couldn't talk about things relating to finance or investments, but I obviously was going to talk about that because that is a huge issue in the university system for Maryland. And I think it's interesting that we can't talk about it. And I mean, it's a little bit of censorship to me. I'm a student at UMBC, and I'm not going to start off by trying to convince you that the widely televised brutal massacre in Palestine is a genocide, because I think everybody knows that it is. You may try to brush this off. Oh, wait, no, that was about divestments. Can't talk about that. Okay, U.S. University System of Maryland claims to have a commitment to civic engagement and civic education, and yet UMD's trucking demonstrations have been swiftly deemed hateful and anti-Semitic and condemned in no uncertain terms by UMD president. He also showed his support by attending an Israeli vigil on campus, but not the Palestinian vigil. The UMB University lit their sign blue in support of Israel, and UMBC continues to have a heavy police presence at any SJP events. And then we had these letters, so many letters that the school sent out, littered with the words conflict, war, self-defense, condemn Hamas, and terrorism. It's like you cannot so much as recognize the fact that a Palestinian is a human being without condemning Hamas in the same breath. And it is not a conflict and it is not a war, and I highlighted it, it's in every single one, usually in the first sentence. These letters have consistently failed to mention the 75 plus years of illegal occupation of Palestinians by the Israeli government, which contributes to the erasure of Palestinian history and gaslights us that what happened on October 7th occurred in a vacuum, which it did not. If killing 1,200 Israelis, a number that has remained steady since October 8th, after 75 years of brutal occupation, is terrorism, then what is the murder of almost 30,000 Palestinian civilians? Call it what it is. Are you scared to because their U.S.-made weapons are manufactured by our investments through our endowment? Instead of listening to us for the last few months, you have wasted our time by asking us to explain statements that we did not make. You are watching our demonstrations and using some form of intimidation or silencing tactics against only Palestinian students and SJP students and anyone who supports them. Nothing has changed in the stances. I've only heard UMB call for a ceasefire. And what is the point if you will not listen to us? You cannot claim to be committed to civic engagement if you are not listening to us. You can start standing on the right side of history now, or continue to be a source of shame for the people after you. Palestinian people embody resistance and have shown the world their unbreakable spirit. They will never back down, and we will never cease to loudly support them. We will not go away quietly. Palestine will be free, and when it is, I hope you can say the way we all proudly can, that we were on the side of humanity.
Madam Chair, that concludes public comment.
Okay, I want to thank those individuals who took the time to share their thoughts with the board. We appreciate your input. We'll now move to the consent agenda. And decisions regarding which items to include on the consent agenda were made by me and the committee chairs. However, any regent may request that an item be removed from the consent agenda for separate review and discussion. Before I move approval of the consent agenda, I ask if there are any items that any region would like removed from the consent agenda for separate review and discussion. Seeing none, I move approval of all of the items on the consent agenda. May I get a second?
Second.
Any abstentions? Seeing none, the motion passes. The next order of business is the Committee of the Whole. We have two items on the Committee of the Whole. As you've been following the forming process for the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA, was recently revised again. This revision has resulted in a number of challenges for students and institutions. Colleges and universities across the country are working to figure out how best to respond. Senior Vice Chancellor of Academic and Student Affairs, Allison Wren, will provide an update on the challenges and how the system is managing this challenge. After Dr. Wren speaks, Dr. Perman, our Chancellor, will give us an update on the system's pathway programs. And just for the Regents and President's awareness, we have a number of initiatives that are led by specific regions that are ongoing. Our prison initiative is led by Regent Bill Wood. Our MHAT studies and are led by Regent Smearick. Here it is, Regents here. Oh, okay, Regents Mirror. And our pathway program is going to be led and supported from a region perspective by Regent Newberger. And so we wanted you to be aware that there are a number of initiatives underway, and the regents are actively taking roles in them. And the chancellor is going to talk about one of them, which is our pathway program initiative. Chancellor?
Thank you, Chair Gooden. The FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, was simplified, quote unquote. And the online form is shorter and is supposed to be easier for families to complete. Over time, it is expected that more people will be able to successfully apply for federal financial aid. Some of the changes include the new FAFSA automatically retrieves most federal tax return data directly from the IRS. Parents who don't have a Social Security number can create an FSA ID, and that's critically important to our students. And the new FAFSA will calculate a student aid index value for each student, and we can use that to determine eligibility for most need-based aid programs. And there's also a revised formula that calculates the SAI values. Most students will have similar results from the new formula, but some students will have higher or lower financial need. The new online FAFSA opened in late December 2023, more than 2 months later than FAFSA usually opens. So that was problem number one. And we typically begin offering aid packages beginning in late January based on information received from the FAFSA. In its latest statement, the department said 3.1 million FAFSA forms have been successfully submitted since the redesigned application went live. However, it has not been a smooth release. The number of open issues on the FAFSA issue alerts webpage dwarfs the number of resolved issues. The open problems include issues that need technical corrections, such as the inability of students whose parents may lack a Social Security number to apply. Even though it allows for that, for some reason there's a glitch that kicks out the application when that happens, as well as fundamental issues related to data collection, including an error that involved a failure to adjust financial aid tables for inflation. On January 30th, 2024, the Education Department announced that U.S. colleges and universities will not receive students' applications for financial aid until at least early March. The delay is a result in large measure tied to those financial aid tables that I just mentioned. James Cavall, Undersecretary of Education, recently said, "The better FAFSA makes it as simple and easy as possible for families to get help paying for college, and updating our tables will help even more students get the help they need." The Education Department has indicated it will send about 50 federal student aid officials to colleges and universities throughout the nation to help them prepare and process student financial aid forms. And they are currently releasing more details about how that will work. Additionally, senior Education Department officials have emphasized that lower resource campuses will be prioritized, including HBCUs and tribal colleges. Indeed, this week, the U.S. Department of Education sponsored webinars for continuing and prospective HBCU students and families. Again, the plan includes $50 million in federal funding for nonprofit organizations that focus on financial aid support, and we're starting to read about who those organizations might be. This is a nationwide problem, so this is not a USM problem or an institution-based problem here in Maryland. It will have negative impacts. It's not just can, it will have negative impacts on fall enrollments, and we're doing everything we can to avoid this. We will need to rapidly package financial aid offers, and students will need to make decisions on where to attend quickly. There could be cascading impacts about housing deposits and scheduling of other things that we have to sort out. Our campuses have been working on this for the past year. They have not just recently started working on this. They're communicating with students. They continue to do so. System-wide, we gather the enrollment management leads every month. The financial aid leaders meet biweekly, and they share their promising practices and information. MHEC has been a part of this as well. They're providing more information on a number of state grants and scholarships, but they too rely on FAFSA. Recently, MHEC hosted its monthly Financial Aid Advisory Council, which includes some USM campus representatives. And so they are striving to adjust to this timeline. We recently, Chancellor Perman issued a statement that we're extending the notion of decision day, which typically is May 1st. We've asked across the system that folks extend to May 15th to give us at least another 2 weeks beyond that if they would like, and that will likely happen. As new information seems to be emerging on a daily basis, we'll continue to monitor the situation and provide updates as needed. Thank you, and if there's some questions, I'll do my best to answer, and if Candace is still here, Candace knows the real details. So.
Well, Dr. Wren, how probable is it that they'll meet the new date?
Depends who you ask. I think people are starting to place wagers, and although I'm a gambling person, I don't know if this is a game I would wager on. It's deeply concernful. They have to. We cannot wait till August to hear financial aid packages.
Yeah. Dr. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Dr. Wren. Very good report. I do want to make sure the Regents are aware of one other thing that wasn't mentioned in your report. You are correct. This is very troubling for all of us and very disturbing. But one of the other aspects is once the FAFSA, the simplified version or whatever version, it does come out, one of the other aspects that impacts our campuses, and especially students who are from lower income, underrepresented students in a major way, and the data shows this, is verification. So this is a process that once all of this goes through, then they have to go through a verification process at the various institutions. Most of you know that I had sat the last year as chair of the ASCU board, that's ASCU, American Association of State Colleges and Universities. And in my position there, I have personally talked to James Koval, Roberto Rodriguez, and also Secretary Cardona himself. All of these three individuals, we let them know collectively these processes are holding up our students and will damage and make a difference to what happens this particular year with enrollment. The good thing, I think, and you can share, you didn't share this with the Regents, is that Secretary Cardona did come out this past week with a letter that says they will limit the number of verifications and decrease that. They will try to add staffing to our institutions. But I think as Regents, and for your background and awareness, you need to be aware that there are further implications that we really cannot predict at this particular time. So you will see, I believe, all 12 of our institutions are enrollment impacted in some kind of way because we depend on making sure we can get students packaged in a timely way, and our staffs are going to be stretched thin, and we're really working, trying to make sure we collectively solve this particular issue. But I felt it was important to bring that to your attention.
Yes. Thank you, President Anderson. And this is why it's so important that our leaders are involved in these national organizations, to have access to the secretary and the undersecretary who clearly listen to you and others. And we're very excited about that. That, again, is it ideal that we don't verify? Not necessarily, but we've got to get the money in people's hands.
Are there any other temporary measures that can be taken to bridge this?
I don't know if some of the campuses have some temporary measures that they're taking that they'd like to share.
Some of you, I think, are finding ways to offer some reassurance.
Yes.
That financial aid will be forthcoming, but I know that that's in some ways risk-prone.
Chancellor, just to follow up, what we're doing at UMES is a couple of things. We're having webinars, we're having conversations with our parents. We're gathering them together on a regular basis. We actually have a team of people trying to help them with the process once it finally is open. We're doing all that we can to try to make this as comfortable for our incoming students as possible. But again, you're talking underrepresented students. It really is really difficult for them to begin with. Other things I think you can do as Regents, just make sure you when you're in conversations or happen to be in the right places, to just mention that things that the Department of Education can do to speed this up would be really appreciated, and it's necessary. And I want to say all of this to just say we understand the simplification is going to be helpful when it finally does roll out. But I don't know what other things they can do at this particular point. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Dr. Wren? Yes.
So since this will have an impact on enrollment, do we have any even guesstimates of what the impact will be system-wide or on individual campuses?
I don't think so, Chad. Have we started to model that at all? We haven't started to model that at all. I think if it goes beyond March, we might have to think about that. Yeah, March is in 2 weeks. I know. You're scaring me, Heidi. I know. Yeah. So, but we haven't begun that yet. But I certainly believe that is a conversation we'll have if it does appear to be going beyond March.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chancellor?
Switching topics. The chair asked me to update the board on activities and intentions related to the interface between pre-K to 12 on the one hand and higher education, specifically us, on the other hand. I'd recall for all of you that our strategic plan calls for the system to engage with pre-K-12 education, pre-K-12 systems. Specifically, priority 2 in the strategic plan, that's the priority that is headlined by access, affordability, achievement. It calls for investment in signature pipeline programs which connect USM universities with pre-K-12 schools. And then priority 3, workforce and economic development, calls for, and this is using the words of the strategic plan, strong and deep relationships with pre-K-12 to improve student pathways and outcomes. So our commitment to this work, the fact that we were prescient enough to make those statements, it's not only timely, it's more than timely. And I'll share with you why, in my view, it's more than timely. First of all, Governor Moore has introduced the Enough Act, which, if enacted, would provide funding opportunities for our universities to partner with community groups on strategies to lift up Maryland's most disadvantaged communities. There needs to be an education component to that. There are obviously so many other societal matters to be dealt with, like housing and poverty, but education is relevant. And among those bills that we talked about, percolating up through the legislature currently, legislators have actually introduced bills that call for higher ed to engage deeply with their local schools. The chair and I, we hear these calls regularly when we visit with the governor and with our lawmakers. What are you doing to make these connections? And I think it's only gotten more acute because of the concerns, the legitimate concerns about learning loss, which ultimately impacts us as students that we wish were better prepared get to college. Anyone who's been listening to the dialogue after my multiple testimony opportunities in Annapolis over the course of at least 6 hearings this past month, what gets teed up in the questions is the regularity of this topic by our legislators. What are you doing in this space? And the questions to me often come down very specifically to the issue of engagement with K-12. And the other thing I would point out to you is that the interface between pre-K to 12 and college and the need to deliberately blur the distinction, it's gaining national currency. That's how we do the pathway work that, as I just mentioned, remediates learning loss among secondary school students and in turn improves college going. I've shared with all of you that I have the privilege of serving currently on the Carnegie Commission for Post-Secondary Education, which is contemplating, and we'll put this in a white paper and recommendations, talking about education as an ecosystem. It's a different way of thinking from where we've been before. And formal programs and structures have arisen nationally, and I've looked into some of them with colleagues. For instance, the Wolverine Pathway, launched by the University of Michigan, is aimed at improving college access and readiness for children from historically marginalized communities in the Detroit area. And the ingredients of the program are much as you would anticipate: academic courses, tutoring, mentoring, college readiness workshop, FAFSA prep, all of which is intended to help students. Nothing's guaranteed at the end, but it's to help students qualify for admission to the University of Michigan. And we've looked at similar programs built on partnerships between K-12 and Ohio State University, through Dr. Rind's previous connections, K-12 and Cal State Long Beach. And we're beginning to learn about the Arizona State University Prep Academy, which engages about 7,000 K-12 students in a pathway program. Thousands of students coming onto the ASU campus over time from 12 schools in the Phoenix area. But happily, we're not novices in this. We've got a lot to show for our efforts. You know about some of these. The longstanding ACES program that USG has stood up in partnership with Montgomery County Schools and Montgomery College. Public schools, a community college, a university. Next door in Prince George's County, the 3D Scholar Program. That's a collaboration between the Prince George's County Schools, Prince George's Community College, we just talked about transfer, and UMGC. Another kind of structure is the formal relationship between Coppin State and Coppin Academy. That's a Baltimore charter school that sits on the Coppin campus. And we heard about this from Provost Mueller, and it was on Kurt's slideshow last night. The highly successful dual enrollment program allowing UBalt to serve now 800 plus Baltimore City high school students in 18 high schools in Baltimore. Dual enrollment, another model. Or the decade-long, highly successful relationship between the University of Maryland and College Park Academy. And there are many more. A long list of meaningful engagements by our universities that our presidents and their teams have created and supported. Programs that you've let me and colleagues visit as I've traveled the campuses over the last years. And meanwhile, at the system level, we're conducting funded research under the leadership of Associate Vice Chancellor Nancy Shapiro, to improve our approaches, to shape the metrics by which we measure our efficacy. And in Baltimore, the presidents of UBalt, Coppin State, UMB, are having discussions with me, and we brought into those discussions the Baltimore City Community College and the Baltimore City school system. We're thinking through a consortium that might engage Baltimore City youth as early as the 6th grade and provide multiple pathways to college and career. College and career. It may not be and doesn't need to be 4-year school for everyone. But the students, certainly the students in the city, need to have pathways, need to have some place that they're going that doesn't leak. When I talk about this to the legislators and across the state, you can imagine what I hear across the state. You guys need to do that here. There's an opportunity for our regional centers in that. So the point I want to make, apart from it's timely, it's more than time, is that we're not starting from scratch by no means. We are already doing a great deal. But there's much more to do. Of course, we can't do everything. We have to focus. We have to argue for resources for what we have already stood up and shown to be effective. I do think that collectively we have opportunities to learn from and leverage each other. And to the board, I say we need your continuing enthusiasm for this important work. And as the chair shared, I'm happy that Regent Newberger, who's long been interested in this kind of work, has indicated that he'd like to work with us going forward, much like Regent Wood, together with Regent Herb, has been with us on the prison education journey, Regent Smerick on our interface with MHEC. This collegiality and help is welcome. So I'll update the board from time to time on these efforts, but I want you to know that this is a priority.
And much like FASA, there's a real sense of urgency around this because things aren't getting better, they're getting worse. For those of you who read the Chronicle from time to time, there was a recent article that said just from 20 to 23, 13-year-olds lost 9 points in the scoring on math, another 9 points, that is, and 4 points in reading. And so we're already down the list of industrial nations for where we sit, but things are definitely not getting better. So we have great hopes, Ike, for the blueprint, because we certainly need to do things to get things going in the right direction. Because I know as presidents, you guys don't want to continually add additional remedial courses, but you certainly will have to if things continue at the rate that they're dropping. So I want to thank the Chancellor and Yehuda for taking this on. One of the big things is just going to be getting an inventory of what we have and understanding how it works across the system. And then once we have that, seeing what else is out there, and I spent a fair amount of time with Mike Pro, which always, any rate, I spent a fair amount of time with Michael, and they're using a lot of robotics and intelligent systems in their charter schools to train students in math and reading, and although we haven't seen it yet, it sounds very exciting because, you know, often we don't have the number of people we need to take some of these programs forward, and this allows you to really exponentially grow that source of education for the students. So seeing these things and understanding these things will be great.
Thank you. I just want to comment on just a couple of things because what the chancellor said was correct. The challenge is even worse than we thought initially. And you may say, why did the General Assembly spend so much time going through and providing the current report that ultimately resulted in the blueprint for Maryland's future? If you look at the numbers, they're startling. Maryland ranks 40th in literacy in the nation, 43rd in math. We're losing over 50% of our teachers who have less than 5 years of actually teaching. And as you may now know, we have a plan designed to address. In fact, this plan is so comprehensive, it basically addresses almost everything from K through 12. And you have a copy of the latest update of it. But this is a plan. And you know the famous remark from Mike Tyson, who said, you know, everyone has a plan. You get hit in the face. And we will be hit in the face. But let me just give you a couple of things to be hopeful about. The state of Mississippi, the poorest state in the entire nation, where families do not have computers in the home, few libraries around, per capita income really bad, was literally ranked at the very bottom. They put together an aggressive plan, and they have now surpassed Maryland from the bottom, and they're somewhere in the middle of the pack, both for math and for reading. So if they can do that, I am convinced that we can do it. Just a few examples. We have significantly increased the number of board-certified teachers in just 1 year. The number of kids now under the plan have quadrupled in terms of K through 12. So there is hope and expectation on the way, but here's the problem that I see, and they're twofold. And I'll give you a slight example if you don't mind. And I use this to illustrate the problem in our state. It's equivalent to a swimmer who decides that he's going to swim between France and England, about 25 or 26 miles. And the swimmer prepares for almost a year to make this swim. And the big day of the swim, he gets in the water, he starts to swim. He gets exactly halfway. And people on the sideline looks at him and says, you know, that's a difficult swim. You're not going to make it. Why don't you turn around? The swimmer decides to turn around and swims back to the shore in which he departed. The problem is that the swimmer actually swam the entire distance, but never got across. And if you look at what we've done in Maryland, that's essentially what has happened. We've had the Thornton Commission. We've had other initiatives. But we get halfway and we turn around and go back. That's one set of problems. The other set is that the swimmer never gets in the water because everyone wants a plan or an objective to be perfect before you get in the water. You need to have all the monies right. You need to have all the plans right. Everybody needs to be perfectly aligned. And you never get in because we're never going to get a perfect situation in order to start this journey. So either we turn around or we don't get in. And people say, we can't make this swim because it's too difficult, there's a hurricane, there's this, that, and the other. Well, I'm originally from Louisiana. And so unless it's a Category 5 hurricane, we're getting in the water. And we're in, and I've told my board, we're going to be successful or I'm going to drown in the water trying to get across. And that's where we are. And so we need your help. We need your support. I've talked to some of the presidents about this. One of the things that we need more teachers. We need more teachers who are special ed. We need more male African-American teachers who have on board. We need larger numbers. And this comes at a time when we see from the pandemic, the number of teachers are going down. But we've been able to significantly increase reduce the vacancies in Maryland based on something that is in this plan, which calls for a minimum salary across the board of $60,000 for teachers. And there are teachers in certain parts of our state that are making $35,000 and $40,000. This plan calls for $60,000 minimum salary. Then you could get an additional $10,000 if you're national board certified. You get an additional $7,000 if you're teaching in one of our challenge schools. But the problem is being consistent and executing this plan with fidelity and not turning around in the middle of the water and swimming back. And if we do that, I am convinced that we're going to have success with it. But I need your help and your support in order to do it. Now, one final thing, last point. This plan calls for all students by the end of the 10th grade to be college or career ready. Let me repeat that. All students by the end of the 10th grade to be college or career ready. And if we do that, we would increase enrollment, we would ensure that we have a system that I believe will be one of the finest in the nation.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me? What I want to say is that I know what Chancellor talked about, the alignment aspect between the pre-K-12 to the education. I mean, I just want to remind that back in 2009, 2010, there was a P20 Council which was formed. And your predecessor, Chancellor Kerwin, was the lead of that. So was Nancy Grasmick. So they wanted to bring the alignment between the K-12 with the higher education. And then when the administration changed and back in 2014 or whatever, that the whole dynamics of the P20 Council was changed from focusing on alignment to focusing on how we can have P-Tech and those type of concept. So as you're saying, Regent Leggett, is that we need to have continuity in those process. I mean, the whole idea there was to minimize the remedial courses, to make sure the students are ready for the college when they come out of the school, and it was all forgotten. And now we are starting again. I know Governor Moore is more in favor of finding out ways how to pay for the remedial courses. I mean, right now, what I see, and I've noticed some of the states have come up with the funding plan to help those students, because what I've heard so far is that those students, when they go for their college and start it, and they take remedial courses, the Pell Grants don't cover that, scholarships don't cover that, they have to pay from their own pocket, and then they realize, oh, I'm not getting credit, I'm paying from my pocket, they get disheartened, and then they leave. So I think there needs to be a plan in place versus, I know there's many things people have suggested, but it's very simple. I mean, you can target the schools which are struggling, focus on them, give them the opportunity so as they come to the college that somehow we should cover those expenses. Maybe a pilot program to start with and see how it works and then scale it up. And I'm sure the legislature will come up with the funding. I think we need to address that aspect besides helping on the math side and helping on the English side. So that's my suggestion. I think there's a lot of history that exists. If we don't build on that historical or that experience, then we're going to reinvent the wheel and maybe sort of lost with the change who may come 6 or 8 years from now.
Just following up on Ike said, I agree with most everything you said, except the last part. While I think teachers' salaries, and we've heard all our lives that teachers are underpaid, and anybody who goes into the teaching profession realizes that they're not going to be wealthy. But there's an extreme teacher shortage because, as you said, teachers last less than 5 years. But the reason they're leaving isn't necessarily money. It's regulations that are jammed down the throat of teachers and school systems from both the Department of Education and state regulations, and student discipline. My daughter was a teacher. My brother-in-law is a teacher. My sister-in-law is a teacher. I have several cousins who are teachers. Half of them have left the teaching profession because they said they just cannot put up with the students and the behavior of the students, which goes totally unpunished or uncontrolled. And when the teacher does try and take control, it's the teacher gets blamed. Or they got parents who go berserk and sue the school system or whatever. And the teachers just get fed up with it. 5 years is accurate. So money is important, but it's regulation and discipline that's driving the teachers out after 5 years, just totally burned out, say, hell with it, I'm out of here.
As I said before, this plan addresses all of that. I mean, there's nothing that I've heard thus far in traveling around the state and talking to people that this plan does not address. So every point that you've just made, this plan addresses.
Yeah, you didn't
The question
mention that in your comments.
the question
That's
is that
important
we
to get
just
out.
have to make sure that we execute it. That's all.
Ike, thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, well, hearing none, I think today we've learned that, as a system, it's not enough to be good, we also have to do good. And there are a lot of people here that are attempting to do just that. The Open Meetings Act permits public bodies to close their meetings to the public in circumstances outlined in 3-305 of the Act to carry out administrative functions exempted by 3-103 of the Act. The Board of Regents will now reconvene in closed session. The agenda for the public meeting today includes a written statement with the citation of the legal authority and reasons for closing the meeting, and a listing of the topics to be discussed. The statement has been provided to the region, and it's posted on the USM's website. Do I have a motion to close?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the meeting is closed. And we're going to be in here, I guess, and we'll start at closed session at 11.